Unexplained Hauntings. Three spine-chilling true terrors discovered at summer. Sinister and Jessica's heart raced as she walked into her quiet home after another grueling shift at the diner. The walls, once her sanctuary, felt suffocating, the familiar creaks echoing like ghosts from the past. As the last rays of summer dipped below the horizon, chilling whispers seemed to swirl around her, tinged with a supernatural dread. Her breath hitched as she caught a glimpse of something darting past her in the dim light, a shadow that flickered, hesitating as if choosing whether or not to reveal its true form. Tomorrow was fall, but terror had already settled in. Terror gripped her as the kids slept soundly, blissfully unaware of the creeping darkness. She brushed it off, as exhaustion trying to get a night's sleep between shifts was taking its toll, but something lurked beneath the surface. The town of Millwood held secrets. Its polished sidewalks and cheerful ways disguised a much older terror, one that pined for vengeance in the chill of the night. Hell, Jessica had heard the stories about Agnes Ryder in hushed tones, around crackling campfires, but this felt different. Something was waiting. Just then, a loud bang erupted from the kitchen. Jessica nearly dropped her phone. Her hand trembled as she approached, the air thick with tension. She could almost taste the fear, sharp and metallic. The door swung open and shut, wildly on its own. "Emma, Jake?" she called, anxiety surging within her. They continued to sleep while she faced the weight of unseen eyes. Jessica's feet moved hesitantly. Each step felt like stepping onto unstable ground, a twisting path bending toward an unseen cliff. Her thoughts raced, desperation clawing at her thoughts. "It's just a door," she whispered to herself. But as she turned away, soft whispers floated through the air, cold and narrow words she couldn't quite catch, but they tugged at her heart, resonating with something primal. She felt it, a chill wrapping around her, clinging to her bones. The very air vibrated with an unspoken promise of horror. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." "Now let's continue," Jessica pressed on, her heart racing even faster now. How could she protect her children when the world outside seemed to blur, twisting into something dark? Alone in the living room, she stumbled across an old local history book, yellowed pages filled with tales of Agnes, a witch betrayed. Climbs of insistent whispers darted through her mind. Chills raced down her spine as she remembered. Agnes had cursed those who wronged her, her spirit lingering just beyond the veil. Was it true? Could spirits thirst for revenge? With each fleeting shadow, the atmosphere thickened, heavy with dread. Emma's cries pierced the silence, seemingly coming from nowhere yet everywhere. Jessica rushed to the bedroom, tugging the door completely shut. The tormenting melody of a calliope played softly in the background, evoking panic. With her heart pounding, she realized she couldn't trust her own instincts. Her family's safety felt like a brittle bubble, threatening to burst at any moment. Would the truth uproot her life? Would Agnes be the end of her? Jessica stood firm, each ounce of her maternal instinct flaring as shadows danced on the walls, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. As the whispers grew louder, she questioned destiny. Who would she sacrifice to save her children? As night closed in, she could no longer hide from the horror that was awakening, a world where secrets and betrayal were interwoven, and she was fraying at the seams. A cold sweat trickled down Jessica's back as she secured the bedroom door, her mind racing like a trapped animal. Emma's whimpering morphed into muffled cries, echoing off the walls. It wasn't just fear. It was terror, the kind that clawed at her insides and threatened to pull her apart. "Shoo, it's okay, baby," she whispered, rushing to Emma's bed. Pulling the covers up around her daughter like a protective spell, Jessica scanned the room. Shadows danced like malevolent spirits, alive in the flickering light of the bedside lamp. "Where is Jake?" Jessica suddenly realized, panic flooding her chest. She dashed out of the room, her heart pounding, and the whispers swelled a cacophony of despair. They clamored for something, demanding attention, begging to be heard. "Jake!" she screamed, the sound of her own voice unnerving her further. As she moved toward the living room, each creak of the floorboards felt like an accusation, a lingering reminder of Agnes' dark legacy. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the strangest sense of being watched washed over her. Jessica stopped in her tracks. Her gaze fell on the kitchen. The door stood ajar, swaying slightly, as though beckoning her closer. "It's just the wind," she muttered, though a part of her knew the wind hadn't been this strong. Shadows flickered within, unveiling movement just at the edge of her vision. With a violent jolt, she crossed the threshold. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the dying ember of twilight seeping through the window, casting a ghostly glow. Suddenly, she heard a sound that froze her blood, an unmistakable laugh, childish, innocent, yet wrapped in an eerie cadence that chilled her to the bone. "Jake?" she called, her voice echoing into the silence. She felt paralyzed, caught between the urge to flee and the responsibility to protect. The laughter persisted, a haunting melody twining through the air like smoke. It led her to the empty dining table, where a single crayon lay sprawled among scattered drawings that appeared abandoned mid-creation. One picture, in particular, caught her eye, a crude depiction of a woman with wide eyes and a twisted smile. Her breath quickened. "What is happening?" As the whispers surged, her children's images appeared in her mind, vulnerable and defenseless. She knew what she had to do, the price to pay if she was to save them. Just as she turned to leave, a shadow flickered in front of her. Who was it? Jake? Agnes? Both? The calliope music intensified, wrapping around her. The comforting tune spiraled into distortion, becoming a grotesque sound that twisted her intestines. With a final glance at the drawing, she bolted back toward her room. But as she reached for the door, it slammed shut in front of her, leaving her staggering backward. The whispers now roared, urging her to listen, to acknowledge the price of silence. Jessica pressed against the door, her nails digging into the wood as she felt the temperature drop. "Open up!" she screamed, desperation coating her voice. And then, there it was, the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing behind her. She turned slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. Heart racing, she met the darkened corner of the room, where something shifted, a silhouette slowly materializing. It was a figure, tall and looming, eyes glistening in the faint light, a familiar laughter rising to meet her fears, her son, but so altered. "Mommy, can you hear them?" Jake spoke, his voice not his own, a chill lacing his words. "They want you." As the last rays of hope drained from her heart, Jessica felt the room grow colder, the walls closing in. The shadows tightened their grip. She faced a terrible choice, a sacrifice on the altar of love or a path toward unbearable loss. But before she could act, the laughter echoed again, and in that moment, she understood. Nothing would stop her from finding the truth that could shatter everything. She had to confront Agnes. What sinister pact awaited her in the darkness? The darkness pressed in, suffocating, as Jessica's breath hitched in her throat. Jake's figure seemed to swell, morphing under the dim light, casting an unnatural shadow that twisted around him. "What do you mean, they want me?" Her voice trembled, barely escaping her lips. Jake stepped forward, or rather, something moved him. The familiar childlike features blurred, replaced by a chilling smile that twisted his face, stretching it almost beyond recognition. The laughter echoed again, drifting through the kitchen like a specter. It was otherworldly, a sound detached from childhood innocence. "Mommy," he said, but the warmth in the plea was gone. What remained was a hollow, dreadful resonance. "They want you to join them." The air felt electric. Dread surged within Jessica, forcing her instincts to fight or flee. She clenched her fists, drawing strength from the adrenaline igniting her senses. "Jake, snap out of it!" she shouted, but Jake only giggled, a sound layered with malice. Wisps of shadow glided in the corners of her vision, slithering closer as if waiting for her to make a move. The walls seemed to vibrate with the whispers that filled every crevice of the house. Each word clawed at her, pleading for her surrender. "Open the door, accept the truth." Fear froze her body, yet the protective instinct surged. She had to reach him, had to pull Jake back from whatever sinister abyss had taken root within his soul. But as she dared to step closer, a pair of eyes dark and hollow peered through the depths behind him. Dread squirmed through her. "No!" Jessica shouted, a shard of courage flashing. "You can't have him!" She lunged, hands outstretched towards her son, brushing against a strange chill. The air thickened like molasses. The laughter grew deafening as shadows danced in a vicious ballet, swirling in frenetic patterns. "Join us, Mommy," Jake's voice echoed. "You'll feel better." "No!" she screamed, kicking away the suffocating dread, digging her nails into her own palms, grounding herself in pain. "I want to give in." The shadows hissed. They recoiled briefly, but then surged forward like a wave, threatening to engulf her whole. In that moment, fragments of memory flashed in Jessica's mind. Warm summer days, laughter in the yard, Jake's outstretched hand when he learned to ride a bike, tangible connections she couldn't allow to vanish into obscurity. But as she fought, something shifted. Jake stepped back, a flicker of confusion crossing his features, like two separate entities battling for dominion. "Mommy, I don't want to hurt you, don't you see? You're not him," she cried, reaching out again, but as her hand brushed against him, she felt the chill seep through her veins. It was wrong. This was her son. It was a vessel, a cruel puppet controlled by the darkness lurking behind him. The floor trembled. The walls creaked as if the house itself was alive, sympathizing with the unseen forces. "You shouldn't have played." Jake's voice faded, overtaken by the whispers that swelled in triumph. The laughter crescendoed to a fevered pitch, creating a cyclone of sound that threatened to drown her resolve. Realization struck her like a lightning bolt. She had to confront Agnes, but first, she had to sever the grasp on her son or risk losing him forever to the shadows. "Fight! Fight, Jake!" she yelled, desperation clawing at her throat. "Fight them!" A sudden shift in the air, a moment of silence, a slight twitch of agency flickered in his eyes. Jessica lunged, bringing her hands to his throat, shaking him gently but firmly, feeling the warmth of who he really was buried beneath the shadow. And then, from the depths of the darkness, a voice boomed, hollow and menacing, "You'll regret this." The lights flickered violently. The laughter stopped abruptly. A palpable tension filled the air. Jessica stared into Jake's eyes, her heart racing. She sensed that this battle had only just begun. What sacrifice would it take to free her child from the sinister lure of the unknown? The question lingered heavily, a haunting reminder of the truth that had yet to unfold. The air crackled with an energy that felt alive, a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Jessica's fingers remained wrapped around Jake's throat, a desperate grip, as if she could hold him anchored in reality. But the shadows pulsed around them, taunting her, hungry for a moment of weakness. "Stay with me." She shook him harder, pleading with him to break free from the suffocating shadows. His eyes, once vibrant and warm, now flickered like dying lights, a confounding mix of fear and something darker. "You're my son, Jake. Don't forget that." The laughter returned, intertwining with her words, growing louder until it turned into an eerie chorus. She could sense it building, an unseen force gathering strength. The shadows slapped against her, curling around her limbs, pulling her deeper into the room that felt more like a prison than home. "Join us," the voice whispered, sliding through the darkness, silky and seductive. "Embrace the truth." No. She couldn't succumb. The memories were there, tugging at her heart like frayed threads. A warm smile, a soft touch, whispers shared in the quiet. She focused on that, using it like a shield against the malevolence pressing in. "I will not lose you." With one last effort, Jessica managed to wrench her gaze from the darkness surrounding them. She looked into Jake's eyes, willing him to see her. In that moment, she saw a spark of recognition, a glimmer of the boy he used to be. "Fight back. Remember all the times we laughed together. Remember your favorite toy?" As she spoke, something shifted in the shadows. They shrank away, drawing back as if her words were sunbeams piercing the abyss. "Mom," Jake's voice wavered, laced with confusion. "I don't wanna." Then the darkness recoiled, a high-pitched shriek echoing around them, and suddenly it all fell silent. The oppressive weight lifted, if only for a moment, and Jessica felt a glimmer of hope. But the stillness was false. It hung in the air like a loaded gun, ready to go off at any second. Shadows crept around the edges, ready to lunge at any sign of weakness. "Jake, keep fighting," she shouted, feeling the tremors in her limbs. As he met her gaze, the fight was palpable, a battle of wills, but wariness flickered in the depths of his eyes. The split within him felt fractious, ready to explode. Without warning, the wall shuddered. Pictures rattled, and in the next breath, they all fell, shattering like her last vestige of hope. "No!" Jessica staggered backward, the echo of glass piercing through the veil of taste and touch. The room began to twist and warp, folding reality into an impossible spiral. "Mommy! I can't hold on!" Jake cried, his voice cracking, merging with the shadows. The air thickened, as if they were trapped inside a nightmare spinning further into chaos. Desperation clawed at her throat, as the world around them caved in. "I won't let you take him." In that moment, the shadows erupted, snapping at her ankles, wrapping around her feet like chains, pulling her closer to the void. And just then, she saw it, a figure emerging, shrouded in darkness yet vaguely familiar. "Agnes," she whispered, understanding dawning like a clap of thunder. Before she could react, the figure pointed a finger at her, lips curling into a frosty smile. "You should have never tried to play. Now the price is steep." The lights flickered back to life, and Jessica felt the cold grip of despair gripping her heart. She couldn't lose him, not to Agnes, not to this hell. "Jake." But as she turned back, Jake's eyes were now entirely devoid of light, that last flicker of recognition extinguished. "It's too late, Mommy," he said, the words dripping with emptiness. Bone-chilling laughter erupted in her ears, echoing through her mind like gravel being stirred up from the grave. How far was she willing to go? In that moment of clarity, Jessica realized she would have to face Agnes, and whatever sacrifice awaited, even if it meant descending into the pit of darkness herself to save her son. The shadows coiled tighter, pulling her inexorably into the darkness. Who would she become? What would she have to lose? As the chaos surged, a single thought anchored her, cold and steady. Either she saves her son, or she would be lost to the shadows forever. But as she took that final step forward, a chilling voice inside her asked, would he even want to be saved? The darkness tightened its grip, and a new reality loomed on the horizon, blurring the lines of her sanity. What awaited on the other side of the threshold? Would it be salvation or damnation? The shadows throbbed, contorting their shapes, almost alive, taunting her with ghostly whispers that danced around Jessica's ears. She could feel the darkness pressing against her skin, seeping into her veins, threatening to squeeze the light from her. As she took that step toward Agnes, her heart raced, pumping adrenaline through her, yet every instinct screamed to run. Get away from him! She shrieked, her voice ringing out, a desperate attempt to reclaim her son from whatever malevolence held him captive. The darkness wrapped around her legs, pulling, dragging her down, as if trying to bury her in the depths of its despair. Agnes's figure rippled in the gloom, her smile wicked, eyes shining like black stones in the night. Do you even see what you're fighting for? You think you can save him? This ISNTA rescue. It's an offer. Her voice twisted around Jessica like a noose, each word a promise drenched in malice. You can protect him, or join him, Agnes hissed. The air thickened, turning suffocating, filling with the weight of unsaid promises hanging just out of reach. No, Jessica cried, her voice a fierce whisper against the encroaching void. She focused on Jake, desperately searching his face for any trace of the boy she loved, the boy who used to laugh, who used to play. All she saw reflected was the emptiness, a chasm of despair that threatened to swallow her whole. But just then, a flicker crossed Jake's face, a crack in the darkness. Mom! He shouted, desperation flaring in his eyes. Help me! Hold on, please! Jessica cried, stretching her arms, not knowing what she could grab onto in the crushing darkness. I'm coming! Suddenly, Jake's eyes transformed, not the hollow void she had seen moments before, but a spark of fear and longing darting through. Then the shadows surged, a wave of darkness crashing over them, distorting the room like ripples in water, blurring the lines of reality. Together! Agnes shrieked, her laughter thrumming through the walls, reverberating with a dreadful rhythm. Join me, or watch him drown. The shadows slithered, curling around Jake like serpents eager to claim their prize. Jessica felt panic rise in her chest, hot and constricting. This was a test and impossible choice. I want to abandon you, she yelled, not just to her son, but to the shadows trying to consume her hope. Iterating fragments of their past, Jessica summoned memories, her voice rising against the oppressive darkness. Remember the summer we went camping? You caught that big fish. The shadows snarled, twisting as if ready to strike. Mom! Jake yelled again, losing strength, his face paling against the darkness that swallowed him. Don't let them take me. No! I will not let go. She was gripping the edges of sanity, tugging him back from this precipice of despair. With all her might, she lunged forward into the fog of shadow, ready to risk everything. The darkness surged, deafening. It roared like an angry beast. But a sudden stillness enveloped them, a heavy pause, time suspended in that heart-stopping moment between despair and hope. Jessica felt a shift, the air crackling with power, and noticed Agnes's triumph faltering, a shadow of doubt crossing her features. What is this? Agnes screamed, her authority disintegrating under Jessica's raw determination. The shadows recoiled as if lashed by an invisible tether. Hope sparked in Jessica's chest, a bright flame flickering against the encroaching dark. You don't own him, she yelled. But before she could move, the shadows coalesced into a new form, a swirling mass, shape-shifting, and a guttural growl echoed through the room. Something ancient, something wrathful was rising from the depths. Would this be the moment for liberation, or the deepening of her despair? As the ultimate confrontation loomed, Jessica drew a breath, ready to fight with every ounce of love in her. Yet the shadows called out eerily, "What will you sacrifice?" The question hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat, pushing her closer to the final moment. The shadows writhed, forming a monstrous silhouette in the air. Jessica's heart pounded painfully against her ribs as the guttural growl echoed through the room. It was an unearthly sound, raw and hungry, and it threatened to swallow her whole. Suddenly, the swirling darkness began to crystallize, morphing into a shape so familiar, yet so distorted. Jessica's breath hitched. It was Jake, or what was left of him. His mouth moved, but the voice that emerged was a twisted reflection of her son's, "Mom, help me." "No!" Jessica cried, shaking her head as tears streamed down her face. "You're not him. You're just a shadow." Agnes laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound that cut through the tension like a knife. "Oh, but this is the true essence of your precious boy. Embrace it, and you can join him. Together in eternal darkness." Even as panic clawed at her insides, a part of Jessica wanted to believe her son was still there, trapped under the shadowy veil. "Jake!" she screamed, extending her arms, searching for a semblance of the child she knew. "Tell me it's you." But the shadow chuckled. "I can give you everything you desire. Your love. Your protection. Just step into the dark and let go of the light." "No!" Jessica shouted, shaking her head violently as dread suffocated her. "You're not real. It's a trick." At that moment, she felt it. A cold wind whirled around her, and the shadows twisted violently, summoning whispers that played on her deepest fears. "They will never be free if you resist," they hissed, echoing Agnes's earlier words. Jessica's legs felt weak, cemented in place. The room closed in on her, as if the walls themselves were joining the malevolence. She forced herself to breathe, to think. What would she sacrifice? The question haunted her like a ghost. Instinctively, her thoughts turned to the sacrifices she'd made before, the sleepless nights, the moments of worry. And she realized there was no depth she wouldn't plunge into for her son. Yet this wasn't about sacrifice. It was about defiance. A memory surged forward, her voice, warm and reassuring, lighting up Jake's face as he chased fireflies on a summer night. "You've always been braver than me," she murmured, almost to herself. "You gave me the strength to face my fears." Drawing deeper from that warmth, she planted her feet firmly. "I'm not afraid of you," she bellowed, channeling every ounce of her love into her voice. "You don't have power over us. You are nothing." Something flickered in the darkness, a momentary ripple as if the shadows were wavering. But Agnes's laughter grew louder, drowning out the spark of hope. "You misunderstand, Jessica. The shadows do not fear you. They want to consume you. Join us." Suddenly, the air thickened, heavy and humid. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Jessica's heart raced as the shadows lunged again, a heavy wave crashing over her, eager to swallow her whole. "Jake!" she screamed, but her voice was snatched away, lost in a sea of despair. In that crushing moment, all she could think about was Jake's laughter, the way he filled the air with joy. Something ignited within her, a desperate spark fighting against the consuming darkness. "I will save you," she yelled again. Yet the shadows closed in from all sides, an engulfing wave, and just before it crashed down upon her, she spotted a glimmer, a shimmer of silver at the edge of her vision. What was that? A way out? The oppressive darkness paused, just for a heartbeat. Jessica seized the moment. Whatever it was, she needed to reach it. She shot forward, but the shadow shrieked in rage, pulling her back with brutal force. And what of Jake? He was fading. She could feel it in her bones. Each heartbeat stung as darkness slithered deeper into her thoughts. "You must choose," they whispered. "Your son, or your own soul." The horror of that choice throbbed in her chest, each whispered suggestion pressing down like a lead weight, a relentless assault. Just when it seemed the shadows would overtake her, a radiance blazed in her heart. What would a mother do in the face of impending darkness? With a fierce determination, she screamed into the void, "I choose love." And then silence. But what awaited her in the aftermath of that cry? Would she be engulfed by the shadows, or would her love pierce the gloom? The tension held tight, every second stretching impossibly as the darkness shuddered around them, anticipating her fate. Jessica held her breath, wondering if she had truly cast her light into the abyss, or if the abyss would finally consume her. Jessica felt her heart stop, an unsettling stillness blanketing the air. Then, like the shift of an impending storm, it rushed in. The shadows that had once threatened to envelop her quivered, as if unsettled by the warmth of her declaration. The shimmer of silver, was it merely a trick of the fading light, or was it, in fact, a beacon? Before she could sift through the confusion, the space wobbled, bending the floor beneath her like a funhouse mirror. Jessica stumbled, but the glimmer danced just out of reach, teasing her with every heartbeat. Light struggled against encroaching gloom, flickering with soft whispers. "Mom, help me!" the voice weaved through the dark, laced with a desperation that knifed into her. "Don't leave me, Jake!" She cried out again, the name barely a breath on her lips. All around her, shadows coiled tighter, eager claws clawing at her ankles, trying to anchor her in despair. The darkness seeped deeper, painting her thoughts blacker than night. "No!" she bellowed, furious tears streaking down her face. "I'm coming for you!" With every ounce of her being, she surged ahead, her arms reaching for the glimmer. The shadows recoiled, hissing as though her light was a scalding flame. They grasped at her, but she fought against their grasp, the image of Jake driving her forward, carrying her through to the light. But the walls around her crashed inwards, groaning and creaking as if the very structure mourned her rebellion. "Join us," they whispered, echoes rippling through her mind. "You will never win." Agnes' laughter roared like a thunderclap, challenging her resolve. "Your love is weak, Jessica. It will not save you or him." And then it happened. The unholy smattering of shadows converged wildly. In a blinding moment, the glimmer of silver morphed into a portal. A rift appeared, painful light filling the darkness. For a split second, Jessica's instinct screamed to tether her soul to this shimmer, to leap into the warmth of the light that promised a rescue. But as she took a step forward, the shadows howled in fury. "This will be your demise." Another pull, violent and swift, yanked her towards the depths. She felt the cold tendrils tear into her will. Panic surged again. Her son, she had to save him. "Jackie!" The scream reverberated, sounding so vastly empty, like a shot in a vacuum. But the sound ignited something. A memory sparked brighter, a time when laughter wrapped around them, and Jake had clutched her hand, leading her through one of their many adventures. She could feel the warmth again, spreading through her veins, as if the memory were infusing her with strength. "I love you!" she shouted into the swirling chaos, anchoring herself to that knowledge. "We will escape." The rift shimmered, pulsing gently now, a heartbeat steady against the horror. Her feet scarcely felt the ground as she lunged towards it, casting one last defiant glance at the shadows. They wailed as if sensing their impending loss, their grasp weakening, retreating from the light. Just as she leapt, the shadows retaliated, launching a final attack that shoved her back. Her body twisted painfully, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of despair. "Let go! You must let go!" The shadows hissed, their voices a chaotic symphony spiraling into madness. She held on fiercely, gritting her teeth. Jessica wasn't alone anymore. Jake's laughter was ringing in her ears, brightening the flickering hope within her. All at once, she felt a surge, a tidal wave of love that was both protective and incendiary. With a desperate push, she flung herself toward the rift. In that instant, the world fell away. As darkness clawed at her heels, she felt the rift of light envelop her entirely. It swallowed her, pulling her through the chasm. But before she could comprehend the transition, one last figure surged toward her from the shadows. Agnes, twisting with fury, her face contorted in rage. "Fool!" she spat, reaching with clawed hands, desperate to reclaim her prize. And then Jessica was sucked into the light, the sound of anguish from Agnes fading away as the portal slammed shut behind her, leaving nothing but silence. But as she landed in the unknown, breathless and disoriented, a chilling question laced through her mind. Had she fought the shadows off, Or had they simply shifted their focus? In the oppressive darkness beyond the rift, something stirred. Was it Jake? Or was it a new terror waiting patiently for her to step into darkness again? Jessica's breath came in ragged gasps as she staggered to her feet. The air was thick and heavy, pressing against her chest like a weight she couldn't shake off. She scanned her surroundings, but all she saw was darkness, shadowy forms swirling like smoke in the corners of her vision. It was as if she stood in a void, a place where light dared not venture. "Jake?" she called, the name echoing in the dull silence. Each syllable seemed to disappear, swallowed whole by the encroaching gloom. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling an intense chill chip away at her resolve. Then, without warning, an echo emerged, a soft whimper that sent icy fingers racing down her spine. It sounded so familiar, so achingly precious. "Mom?" The voice was fragile and distant, teasing her ears, beckoning her deeper into the abyss. "Jake." Her heart raced as hope ignited anew, burning fiercely against the shadows. She took a tentative step forward, and the darkness recoiled, pulsating as if it were alive. The sound of soft whispers filled the air, slithering around her like serpents, calling her name in mocking laughter. "Foolish woman," they hissed. "You think you can save him?" "No!" Jessica shouted defiantly, shaking her head, as if that could banish their taunts. With every ounce of strength she could muster, she pushed through the oppressive atmosphere, straining toward the voice that remained just out of reach. The ground beneath her shifted as she took another step. The walls pulsated, narrowing in on her. She pressed her hands against them, feeling the cold, clammy surface beneath her fingertips. "Help me! Where are you?" The despair in her voice was palpable, and she could almost taste the bitterness of her fear. Just then, the ground groaned. Time seemed to shatter, as a figure emerged from the swirling darkness. It was a silhouette, a small boy, no more than Jake's age, his features obscured by the shadows. "Mom!" The boy's anguished cry pierced through the fog of her panic, lighting a fire in her soul. "Jake!" she yelled, lunging forward. But the shadows tightened around her ankles, crawling upwards as if they were alive, biting and gnashing at her resolve. "Let go!" she shouted, yanking herself free. For a moment, the darkness hesitated, revealing the flicker of light that surrounded the boy. It was faint but unwavering. With one desperate motion, she flung herself towards him, every instinct urging her to run. But the shadows surged back, tightening their hold. "You don't belong here!" they shrieked, a cacophony of rage and despair echoing in her mind. "I want to abandon you!" she screamed, breaking through the confusion. "I'm not leaving you!" At that moment, a bright breach of light exploded before her. It blinded her, making her shield her eyes, but when she opened them, the boy stood with a crooked smile that struck her heart like a blade. He reached out, and the shadows pulled back, hissing in defeat. "Mom, come on!" he urged, his voice thick with urgency. But the shadows, realizing their grip was weakening, grew frantic. They lashed out, a violent swirl of arms reaching for her, desperate to reclaim their prey. Their whispered threats engulfed her, piercing into her very essence. "You will be ours," they screeched, pulling at her memories, clawing at her will. "Not if I don't let you!" Jessica shouted defiantly, charging headlong into the light towards Jake. But just as she reached for him, the light dimmed, flickering like a dying star, revealing not just Jake, but a myriad of ghostly figures behind him, their faces twisted in anguish, murmuring in a chorus of heartbreak. In that moment of realization, dread pooled in her gut. These were the lost, the forgotten, trapped here for eternity. "Mom!" Jake's voice trembled, but before she could answer, the malevolent shadows surged one last time, wrapping around her tightly. "Choose!" The deep voice of Agnes echoed from the void, her presence suffocating. Choose him, or choose them. Terror gripped Jessica's heart. The decision loomed like a guillotine, cold and unyielding. But what was the price for either choice? Jessica, Agnes whispered cruelly from the darkness, your time is running out, with panic clawing at her throat. Jessica felt the oppressive weight of history closing in like a vice. She must choose. But what if the choice was worse than the shadow? Would the truth bind her to one ghost or another? And as the shadows began to squeeze tighter, she understood all too well that the cost of her decision could ripple across lives she would never know. Jessica, hurry. Jake's voice faltered, lost in the darkness. Was he real? Or just another illusion born from desperation, as the void tightened its sinister grip? Jessica's heart thundered in her chest, each beat a countdown to her next breath. The shadows writhed, a black sea of despair swarming around her, whispering her name like a sinister lullaby. Choose, they echoed, the word wrapping around her like chains. Please, Jake, she cried. I can't. The dark figure of Agnes loomed closer, her twisted features skimming the edges of a smile that dripped malice. You must decide, my dear. Time is precious here, as precious as your son's life. Jessica's resolve wavered. The faces behind Jake contorted with pleas, their mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. She could feel the pain radiating from them. Mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, they all wanted to be saved, but there was no one to take Jessica's place in this hellish equation. A freezing sweat broke over her skin. Choose, Agnes thundered, her voice ripping through the haze of uncertainty. With every fiber of her being, Jessica screamed back, I refuse to choose. Jake stepped closer, the space between them all too fragile. Mom, please. I'm real. I need you. You have to trust me. His eyes radiated fear, yet underneath that, she saw something else, the unmistakable glimmer of hope, but the whispers grew louder, crescendoing into a torrent of anguish. Help us, free us, they cried in unison, clawing at her sanity, the cacophony threatening to pull her apart from the inside. No, Jessica shouted, forcing her way through the maelstrom. I won't abandon anyone. Not you, not him. She felt the shadows tighten, hungry for her despair, but she was done being afraid. She took a step toward Jake, her determination burning bright against the suffocating darkness. Mom! His desperation clawed at her heart, anchoring her in that moment. Agnes shrieked, a pure, wretched sound that echoed through the void, and the darkness roared in response, swirling violently. Jessica's fingers brushed against the cold, slick surface where Jake stood encased in light. She could almost feel his warmth beckoning her. Don't let them win, she shouted into the chaos, steering herself firmly towards him, rebellious love igniting her spirit. But just then, the shadows surged, wrapping around her once more, pulling her down. You're ours. You cannot escape. Her mind raced. What could she do? The darkness was pervasive. She felt it in her lungs, tasted it on her tongue. But the love she felt for Jake was stronger. If she could just hold on to that, Jake, I will not let go, she cried. The shadows screamed in anger, and in that moment, she summoned everything she had within her. She envisioned light, imagined radiant beams cutting through the dark, imagined tearing it asunder. Suddenly, an explosion of light shot forth from her core, illuminating the abyss. The shadows recoiled, hissing like creatures caught in the sunlight. Run, Mom, Jake urged, his small figure shimmering in the brightness that was spreading, dissipating the blackness ever so slowly. The shadows writhed as the radiant burst expanded, a desperate fight against the light. But Jessica took off, feeling the ground solidify beneath her feet, shoving aside despair as she surged towards her son. Hold on, she screamed, reaching for him just as the shadows crashed around them in a final fury. She felt his small fingers slip through hers, warm and real, and she pulled him close. But the moment they connected, the very fabric of the darkness split with a furious howl, and a disorienting force yanked them apart. Jessica felt herself wavering, the light flickering in and out, the soothing warmth of Jake's hand slipping away. "No!" she screamed, panic clawing at her throat. "No!" With one last look at her son, she felt a heavy weight settle over her shoulders. A shadow settled over her heart, and she realized with a stomach-churning dread that the price might be more than she could bear. "Jessica, you made your choice." Agnes's voice was a cold letter from the grave. "What will you relinquish?" Darkness seeped into her veins, pulling her down into the cold abyss once more, and as her vision blurred at the edges, she understood. The grim irony could saving Jake cost her everything? The shadows whispered promises she could not ignore, and all hope began to dim. But what awaited her in the shadows might be far worse than the truths she left behind. Jessica's heart slammed against her chest as the turmoil surged within her. Anguish twisted around her thoughts, pulling her into the depths of despair. But amid the chaos, a fierce determination ignited. She was not just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for Jake, the light of her life, and she wouldn't let that light flicker out. "Enough!" she bellowed, her voice rising above the guttural screams around her. The shadows recoiled, momentarily disoriented. That flicker of power surged back within her, a force both fragile and fierce. She anchored herself to the love she held for Jake. "Jake!" she cried out again, her voice cutting through the darkness like a beacon. "Hold on to me." Swirling shadows clung to her ankles, twisting and gnashing, desperate to pull her back into their suffocating embrace. "You'll never win, Jessica," they hissed, but their venomous words only strengthened her resolve. She could feel the shadow's grip faltering against her growing light. The radiant glow sparked in her belly, fueled by memories of summer laughter and twinkling fireflies. "You don't control me," she shouted, her arms radiating warmth, as they shot toward the glimmering light that encased Jake. A bond of love surged between them, bridging the infinite distance that had felt so insurmountable moments before. "Mom, help me! Please!" His voice trembled with urgency, a desperate plea that reached into her soul, igniting something within her that threatened to break open the very fabric of the darkness encompassing them. As she surged forward, a raw energy pulsed around her. Light flickered in waves, a stunning contrast to the shadows writhing against her. "I will not choose!" she howled, refusing to let the darkness dictate her fate any longer. "Jake, I'm coming!" With that declaration, she felt a shift. The darkness hissed, recoiling as if a wound had been created in its very essence. But shadows have a way of rebounding, and with sudden fury, they lunged back, forcing her to brace herself as they unleashed a torrent of rage. "Join us!" Agnes's voice bellowed, a cacophony of anger and desperation. But Jessica wouldn't yield. She pushed through the chaos, determined to break free. "Jake!" she screamed, and as she broke past the nearest whirl of darkness, she finally saw him clearly, illuminated by the brilliant glow of their love. He stood there, arms extended, hope shimmering in his eyes. "I'm right here!" she shouted, launching herself toward him. The darkness shrieked in rage, shadows swirling like a tempest, but Jessica's heart was unwavering. She reached out as if crossing a celestial divide. "Together!" she cried, as their fingers brushed against one another, an electric connection fueled by love. As their hands clasped, an explosion of light erupted. It washed over them like a tidal wave, illuminating the abyss surrounding them, breaking apart the shadows that had held them captive. "Let go of him!" she screamed, pouring every ounce of her will into the radiant force enveloping them. The floors trembled, and the walls shook as the shadows shrieked in agony, their dominion collapsing under the weight of their defiance. But the darkness would not surrender easily. Agony echoed in the air, as a howl of fury rose from the depths around them. What will you give up to save him? Agnes sneered, her voice breaking in and out like static. Everything, Jessica shouted fiercely. I'd give up my last breath. But I will not let you have him. The vibrancy of her love filled the void, contrasting sharply against the suffocation of despair. Their simultaneous determination created a radiant wellspring that pulled them closer, igniting Jake's spirit. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, hissing in panic. They twisted and shrunk as they fought against the onslaught of light. In that moment of clarity, something shifted in the air. The shadows began to crack, revealing glimmers of pale light that shone through. Then, with a final desperate cry, she gripped Jake's hand tighter. Together they hurled themselves towards the heart of the brilliance, embracing the unknown with open arms. In a flash, the darkness shattered. The shadows evaporated as waves of light cascaded over them. The air crackled. They tumbled forward, engulfed by warmth. And then silence. Jessica blinked, disoriented yet alive, the harmonious warmth enveloping her as she lay on grass, alive and vibrant. The chamber of shadows fell away, collapsing into nothingness behind them. Jake, she gasped, lifting her head to find him cradled beside her, vibrant and bright as the summer sun. She rushed to hold him, tears streaming down her face. You're here, you're really here, Mom? Jake's voice was soft, filled with a relief so profound that it rooted them both in that miracle of being. We're okay, Jessica whispered, holding him tightly as laughter bubbled forth. It felt like a shared breath of life itself, a renewal. But above them, the sky rumbled ominously as remnants of Agnes's enraged cries echoed into the void, warnings of shadows that still lurked in unseen corners. Jessica drew back slightly, eyes wide with realization. This isn't over. Jake looked at her, fear threading through his features. What do we do now? Jessica took a deep breath, rising to her feet, her heart steadying against the world around them. Now we fight back, she affirmed. Together. We break the cycle. We don't let fear dictate our lives. Hand in hand, they walked toward the fading twilight, a new dawn painting the sky. They would not let the darkness reclaim what was rightfully theirs. They were the light in the dark. Together, they would face whatever haunted the edge of their reality. And so, Jessica and Jake ventured onward, armed with hope and love, ready for the next chapter of their lives, determined to face whatever shadows might arise. Don't let the darkness win. You need to subscribe now for more gripping stories like this. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help others find this tale. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about their journey. Let's discuss. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who crave a thrilling conclusion. Your support matters, and only true fans understand the power of spreading the word.